The backbone of the American Allied forces, on the other hand, was the M4 Sherman. The M4 Sherman was the most widely used tank by the Americans and was known for its reliability and ease of maintenance. The Allies had 83,000 men, under the 102nd Cavalry Regiment. In terms of hardware, they had 242 Sherman tanks, 182 tank destroyers, and 394 pieces of divisional artillery. The M4 Sherman tank was one of the most widely used tanks during World War II and played a significant role in the Allied victory. It was produced in large numbers, with over 50,000 tanks manufactured in various models during the war. The tank was designed to be easy to manufacture and maintain, and it featured a welded hull and a reliable, easy-to-maintain engine that made it a favorite among Allied tank crews. One of the most notable features of the M4 Sherman was its versatility. The tank could be used in a wide variety of roles, from infantry support to armored warfare. The Sherman was 19.2 feet in length and 8.6 foot in width, with a height of 9.10 feet and a weight of 62,611 pounds. The tank was armed with a 75mm gun, which was effective against most enemy tanks at the time. However, the tank's relatively thin armor made it vulnerable to enemy fire, especially from German tanks like the Tiger and Panther. To counter this weakness, the M4 Sherman was often used in massed formations, with tanks supporting each other in battle. This tactic, known as swarming, allowed the tanks to overwhelm enemy positions with superior numbers and firepower. The M4 Sherman was also highly maneuverable, which allowed it to quickly shift positions on the battlefield and take advantage of weaknesses in the enemy lines. The M4 Sherman had several variants that were developed during the war, each with its own unique features and capabilities. One of the most notable was the M4A3E8 Sherman, also known as the Easy 8, which featured a larger turret and a more powerful engine that improved the tank's mobility and firepower. The tank was also used in specialized roles, such as amphibious landings, where it was used to provide fire support for troops as they landed on beaches. Despite mounting a 75mm cannon, the Sherman tank suffered from a significant disadvantage due to its low-velocity gun. The designers believed that such a gun would be more durable than a high-velocity one, but they failed to anticipate that few Shermans would ever last long enough in battle to wear out their barrels. Although later versions included an improved high-velocity gun, these upgrades did not reach frontline units until late November 1944, 5 months after the Normandy invasion. Furthermore, with armor measuring only 81mm, the Sherman was considerably thinner than the Panther and could not withstand its armor-piercing ammunition. However, the Sherman did possess some advantages. Its thinner armor made it lighter and more maneuverable on solid ground, a critical asset in the cold, hilly terrain and small villages of Western Europe. Additionally, the Sherman's turret had a much quicker rotation rate than the Panther's, allowing American crews to fire the first shot in combat most of the time. The Sherman was more reliable than the Panther, which was more prone to mechanical breakdowns and difficulties. On paper, no Sherman tank could stand up to a Panther. But the U.S. 3rd and 7th Armies enjoyed several significant advantages, including superior air support, ample reserves, excellent logistics, and overwhelming numerical superiority. With its speed and agility, the Sherman could outflank enemy armor, leaving them vulnerable to American tank destroyers and aircraft. Germany had been at war for 6 years before most American tanks invaded France. Sherman tank crews held a critical advantage in experience. In early August, Adolf Hitler directed that all new Panthers be sent to new armored formations instead of depleted divisions. As a result, Germany's veterans were supplied with lighter Mark IVs, while new, inexperienced crews were assigned the better tanks. Therefore, whenever American tanks confronted Panthers, they were usually more adept in the tactics of close combat. Even with its relatively thin armor and other limitations, the M4 Sherman played a crucial role in the Allied victory in World War II. The tank was used in countless battles and campaigns, and it was beloved by the Allied tank crews who fought in it. Its reliability, ease of maintenance, and versatility made it a favorite among tank commanders, and its contribution to the war effort cannot be overstated. Tanks were typically cramped and uncomfortable, with limited space for the crew and equipment. The interior of the tank was often dark and hot, and the noise from the engine, the rattling of the tracks, and the gunfire was deafening. Crew members had to endure constant vibration and jolting as the tank moved over rough terrain or when it was hit by enemy fire. The crew of a tank typically consisted of 4 to 6 members, each with specific responsibilities. The gunner aimed and fired the tank's weapons, while the loader prepared the ammunition and kept the weapons system running smoothly. The commander oversaw the crew and coordinated their actions. In addition to these core crew members, some tanks also had a radio operator or other specialist crew members. The crew had to work together closely and communicate effectively in order to operate the tank effectively and survive in combat. The crew often formed a tight bond, relying on each other for survival and support. Crew members also had to endure the discomfort of being confined in a small space for long periods of time, often without access to food, water, or sanitary facilities. In addition to the physical challenges, the crew also faced significant psychological stress. Tanks were often targeted by enemy fire, and the crew had to be constantly on the alert to avoid incoming rounds. They also had to deal with mechanical problems that could arise during combat, such as damaged tracks or weapons systems. These challenges could take a toll on the crew's mental and emotional well-being, and many crew members suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. The Battle of the Bulge came to a head in the Battle of Bastogne. Bastogne was a strategic location, situated at the intersection of several major roads, and was critical for the German army's advance. In a surprise attack on the morning of December 16th, over 400,000 German soldiers, 1,400 tanks, and 2,000 artillery pieces advanced towards Bastogne. They were led by General Gerd von Rundstedt, who was determined to break the Allied lines and capture Antwerp. The American soldiers were caught in a dire situation, heavily outnumbered by the enemy forces at a ratio of roughly 5-1. Compounding their troubles, they were ill-equipped to cope with the harsh winter conditions, lacking in essential supplies like ammunition, food, medical provisions, and senior leadership. Several senior officers, including the commanding officer of the 101st Division, Major General Maxwell Taylor, were away at the time, leaving the troops in a precarious position. Adding to their woes, the winter weather was particularly harsh, rendering air resupply impossible and tactical air support unavailable due to heavy cloud cover. The combination of these factors made the American soldiers' predicament all the more challenging, and their survival seemed uncertain. The Germans quickly surrounded the town, cutting off all supply routes, and demanded the American army's surrender. However, General McAuliffe replied with a single word: "Nuts!" On December 23rd, General Patton's 4th Armored Division sent 3 combat commands to Bastogne to break the German blockade. However, their progress was hindered by the destruction of a critical bridge and enemy forces positioned in the town of Sherman. Despite these obstacles, the division pushed on, determined to relieve the surrounded American forces in Bastogne. As they entered the town, they were met with fierce resistance from German forces who had established strong defensive positions. One of the most formidable adversaries they encountered was the Jagdtiger, a heavily armored tank destroyer, which was among the most powerful weapons of the Second World War. The Jagdtiger was notorious for its ability to penetrate even the thickest Allied armor at great distances, and its presence on the battlefield was a significant threat to the advancing Allied forces. The Jagdtiger, meaning hunting tiger, was a massive tank destroyer. It was designed to counter the Allies' increasing use of heavily armored tanks, and its primary role was to provide long-range anti-tank support to the German army. The Jagdtiger was based on the chassis of the Tiger II tank, one of the most feared tanks of the war, and featured an 88mm main gun, the largest weapon ever mounted on a German tank during the conflict. Weighing in at over 70 tons, it was the heaviest tracked vehicle to fight in the Second World War, with a length of 33 feet and a colossal 9 feet in height. The tank was heavily armored, with up to 250 millimeters of frontal armor that made it nearly impervious to enemy fire. However, the Jagdtiger's sheer size and weight made it challenging to maneuver, and its limited mobility made it vulnerable to air attacks and flanking maneuvers. The tank's maximum speed was only around 20 kilometers per hour, making it one of the slowest tanks of the war. Its large size also made it difficult to transport by rail, which was a significant problem for the German army, given the destruction of Germany's road network and the limited fuel available. Due to its size and complexity, the Jagdtiger saw limited action during the war, and only 85 units were produced. Its high cost, long production time, and limited availability of spare parts made it difficult to maintain and repair. However, its impressive firepower and armor made it a symbol of German tank design and engineering prowess. During the Battle of Sherman, the Allied forces suffered a total loss of 18 tanks, which was a significant setback. However, on December 24th, General Patton still ordered his remaining tank divisions to join the attack on Bastogne. The Allied forces needed to act quickly to break the blockade and relieve their besieged comrades. On December 26th, the 4th Armored Division launched one of the most daring armored charges in history, unleashing a barrage of Sherman tanks on the heavily defended town. Despite facing a barrage of German defenses, including minefields and tanks, the Allied forces pressed on, eventually breaking through the final line of German defenses and punching a hole through the siege of Bastogne. The weather eventually cleared, allowing for air support from the Allied war machine, which proved devastating for the German forces. However, the victory was not without a high cost. The 4th Armored Division suffered 1,000 casualties, including wounded and killed soldiers, and 28 tanks were lost in the process. Ultimately, the combination of tanks, artillery, and airstrikes proved too much for the Germans to handle, and the Battle of the Bulge ended on January 12th. Today, in the Luxembourg province of Belgium, near Bastogne, stands the Battle of the Bulge monument, serving as a powerful testament to the unwavering valor and sacrifices of the American forces. The memorial stone bears a poignant Latin inscription. The Belgian people remember their American liberators, the 4th of July, 1946. In the aftermath, a small girl among those being evacuated to Sorinas had lost her shoes, so an American soldier from the 82nd Reconnaissance Battalion forced a German prisoner at gunpoint to take off his boots and give them to her. They were much too large, but she was just able to walk, while the German soldier faced a long march over frozen ground with frostbitten feet. When seen in the broader context, the Battle of the Bulge counteroffensive proved to be a catastrophic undertaking. Although the Allies sustained approximately 75,000 casualties, Germany's loss of 120,000 men and crucial equipment that couldn't easily be replaced meant that they had relinquished their ability to mount an extended defense against a renewed Allied assault. This realization had a demoralizing effect on the German troops and shattered any hopes they had of turning the tide.